Dear students, greetings of the day. I hope you all are healthy, staying safe, and taking good care of your health. As in previous lecture, we talked about basics of service and service marketing, and we have seen characteristics of service marketing. So in this video lecture, we are going to discuss about difference between goods and services because this is also very important to understand difference between these two so that being manager you can better formulate strategy to deal with goods and services separately in the market. So moving ahead, in today's lecture, this difference between these two, I'm going to cover in these four points. First, we'll look at the comparison chart, wherein we will look at comparative study between these two. Then definitions of goods and services once again. Then key differences, the basis of differences, which you will have to keep in mind at the time of formulating any strategy related to goods and service. And finally, we'll look at conclusion, what we learned in this video lecture. Moving ahead, come to comparison chart. So uh, we need to understand the basic nature and characteristics of goods as well as services so that we can differentiate between these two. Moving ahead, look at the comparison chart. So in this first column, the basis of comparison given there. In second column, goods, and in third column, services are mentioned. Now come to the very first basis of comparison or difference is meaning. So first we'll have to understand what is goods and what is services. So goods are the material item that can be seen, touched or felt and are ready for sale to the customers. So this is what goods, something which is physically exist. While services are, just a moment. While services are amenities, facilities, benefits, or help provided by other people. So, means services that are intangible. Now come to nature, that is very clearly written. The nature of goods are tangible in nature, while, just a minute, nature. Goods are tangible in nature, while services are intangible in nature. Now, the next basis of difference or comparison is transfer of ownership. As goods are physical commodity, right, which exists physically. So, in case of anything which physically exists, transfer of ownership is possible. That is why it is written yes there. While in case of services, as it not exists, so there is no transfer of ownership, right? Moving ahead, another basis of difference or comparison is evaluation. How we can evaluate. So evaluation of goods is very easy and simple because if something physically exists, we can look, we can touch, we can have possession of it, and we can feel. So by looking at two different commodities, we can easily evaluate which one is good and which one is not good or comparatively not good. While in case of services, we have nothing to look at, we have nothing to touch, nothing physically exists in case of services. So evaluating service or comparing two different services are very much complicated. So that is why it is mentioned one is very easy and simple. In case of services, it is very complicated. Now come to return. If we talk about return, so return of goods can be done, means one can easily return goods, right? But in case of services, we cannot return back once they are rendered or once they are provided. So we cannot render back the service. Just take example of restaurant services. If uh, you are provided with the serving facility there in the restaurant, you cannot return it back because there is no way to do it. So services cannot be returned. Now come to separability. Yes, in case of goods, production and consumption can be separated, right? And it can be also separated, from producer to the distributor to dealer, dealer to retailer, retailer to seller. So separation takes place at multi-stage in case of goods, while in case of services, as uh, that is perishable in nature, because production and consumption of any service takes place simultaneously. So it cannot be separated from production. Means production cannot be separated from consumption, right? Next, basis of difference is variability. Based on variation, if we talk about variation or variability in case of goods, so variability in case of goods are identical in nature, while in case of services that is diversified, because in case of goods standard products may be produced, but in case of services standard services cannot be ensured because the involvement of human being during service production process. Now come to storage. As we already discussed about feature of services, and we have seen that services are perishable in nature, means services cannot be stored. If something is perishable, that cannot be stored. So it is very clearly mentioned that services cannot be stored, while in case of goods, goods can be stored for use of future or multiple uses. We can store any physical commodity and we can use it multiple times till it exists. And last basis of difference is production and consumption. On the basis of production and consumption, we can also differentiate goods and services. As far as goods are concerned, there is a time lag between production and consumption. Why? Because production takes place at one end in a factory, while consumption takes place at another end or at the end of consumer. Right? So there is lag between production and consumption. While in case of service, there is no lag. Why there is no lag? Because production and consumption takes place simultaneously, right? So these are the basic comparative difference or basic differences between these two, goods and services. Moving ahead, now come to definitions. Just a moment. So now we will have to look at definition of definition of goods and services. As we already discussed about what is service in previous video lecture, but we will look at about services. So moving ahead, come to definition of goods. As we already discussed what is goods. So as goods are concerned, goods refer to the tangible, consumable products, articles, commodities that are offered by the companies to the customers in exchange of money. They are the item that have physical characteristics, that is shape, appearance, size, weight, etc. It is capable of satisfying human wants by providing them utility. Some items are made for one-time use by the consumer, while some are repeatedly be used. Goods are the products which are traded on the market. There is a time gap in the production, distribution, and consumption of goods. When the buyers purchases goods and pays the price, the ownership is passed from seller to buyer. Then products are manufactured in batches, which produces identical units or standard units or similar units, we can say. In this way, a particular product offered by a company will have the same specifications and characteristics all over the market because of the identical production process. For example, uh, being student, you must have seen various books. So let's take example of book say Service Marketing by C. Bhattacharya. Excel book publisher publishes this book. So this book is identical or similar with me and with you all if you have. So the size, the color, the pasting, number of pages, chapters, everything remains same. Similarly, pen, bottles, bags, or whatsoever physical product you can consider. Moving ahead, definition of services. We already discussed so many things about services. I'm not going to dictate it once again, but yes, uh, I'll just tell you the example. Postal services is one of them. Banking and insurance, transportation, communication, hospitality. So these are the various examples of services. As we already discussed, services are intangible, right? That is perishable in nature, that is heterogeneous in nature, that is inseparable in nature, right? And to understand what is service, we can also consider one line definition. Services are the intangible economic product that is provided by a person on the other person's demand. It is an activity carried out for someone else. So this is what service in short. I'm not going into detail because we already discussed in previous lecture. And if you again want to understand what is services, I'll request you to look at lecture number 2. Now come to key differences. Why I put up key differences once again here? Because it is very much helpful if we remember bullet points to differentiate something. So what I did is I did nothing. I just kept all the points which I use as basis of differences so that you can recall it, you can remember it, and you can use it whenever, wherever it is required. So on the basis of meaning, one is tangible, another is one intangible based on nature. Again, goods are tangible, services are intangible. Based on transfer of ownership, in case of goods, transfer of ownership is possible, while in case of services, transfer of ownership is not possible. Evaluation. Evaluation of goods can be done because it physically exists, while in case of services, we cannot evaluate easily because of differences in service production process. Return. As goods physically exist, so we can return it. But services are intangible in nature, so we cannot return it, or it is not possible to return services. Separability. Goods are separable from production. but services cannot be separated because uh, production and consumption takes place simultaneously. Next is variability. Yes, goods are identical while services are variable in nature. Storage of goods are possible while we cannot store services. And last one is production and consumption. So production and consumption takes place separately in case of goods, while there is no possibility to separate production and consumption in case of services. So these are the key differences between goods and services. So by keeping these points in mind, you will be better able to remember the basis of differences, and you can easily differentiate between these two. Why we need to differentiate? Because being budding manager, you will have to formulate certain strategy to deal with either goods or services. So if you you are going to formulate any strategy to deal with goods, so you will have to keep some bullet points related to goods. And if you are going to formulate certain strategy to deal with services, right, or for services, so you will have to again keep some bullet points in your mind so that you can formulate some strategy to deal with service only. So that is why we need to differentiate between these two, because ultimately it helps to formulate strategy for organization. So here we come to the conclusion of today's video lecture. What we looked at comparison between these two, that is goods and services. Then we have seen definitions of goods and services separately. Then we have seen key differences or bullet points or basis of differences on which we can differentiate. So in conclusion, we can say generally companies keep a stock of goods with itself to fulfill an urgent requirement of goods. It also keeps track of the quantity of goods at the beginning and at the end, while in contrast to services are delivered as per the request of the customers itself. In short, the production of services depends on the customer's demand. Both are subject to tax alike. Value added tax is levied on goods, while service tax on service provided. And now these two are clubbed and considered as GST, goods and services tax. Sometimes products offered by companies in such a way that it's hard to segregate goods and services. Like in case of restaurant, you pay for the food you ate, as well as for the add-on services of the waiter, chef, watchman, and so on and so forth. So you cannot segregate easily in case of services, wherein so many goods are associated with service. So this is how we can differentiate, we can formulate strategy, and we can lead in our career as a manager. I hope you all enjoyed this video lecture. Thank you for patient listening. And once again, in case of any query related to this course, or especially any query related to this video lecture, you may write me your query on my mail ID, that is mayankpande.gn@jagannath.org. Thank you so very much. Happy learning.